This is Harvard on the Map, presented by the Harvard Graduate School of Design, covering innovative ideas and thought leaders in digital cartography, Earth observation, and all things geospatial, with your host, Jennifer Horowitz.
Hello, and welcome to Harvard on the Map. I'm here with Ariel Seidman, and he is the founder of HiveMapper, which is a company that I've had a lot of interest in for a while, and I'm very excited to talk to him. Thanks for coming on the program.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, so I think it would be great to start if you could maybe, for our listeners who may or may not know about HiveMapper, to sort of describe how HiveMapper came to be and what they do.
Yeah. So I think, like a lot of kids, I was always really into maps, and had maps all over my room. Subscribed to geeky mapping magazines, but maybe unlike a lot of other kids, never lost that passion for maps. And so a professional mission of mine for the past many years has been to build a new kind of map. And the reason for that is just quite simply because the way that we've created maps hasn't fundamentally changed in about 15, 20 years. So, Google Street View, has these relatively expensive cars, each roughly $500,000 each. They move them around from city to city every couple of years. People launch new satellite systems, which are also incredibly expensive, and take pictures of the Earth. And what this means is that the way we produce maps is incredibly expensive, and our ability to update the maps very, very quickly is limited because it's so expensive to actually create the maps in the first place. And so I've always felt, going back even to my time at Yahoo, where I worked on Yahoo Search, Yahoo Maps, like that there had to be a different way. And finally, a lot of the kind of core technologies that are necessary came into being, enabling us to create and really scale, more importantly, a new kind of map. So that's maybe a little bit longer answer than you anticipated, but now kind of shifting to what exactly HiveMapper does, what we do is actually quite simple. We take video from commodity drones and commodity dash cams, and we've built this incredible piece of technology where we transform that video into this highly accurate three-dimensional map. And then we have a contributor network. So, people like you and I driving around, flying around, and they are the ones who are scaling this map. And so the map is now active, or I should say the contributors are now actively mapping in about 80 countries. So that's up from, I think, only like a small handful in January timeframe. So it's been, frankly, super exciting to see all these people. There's a guy in Sarajevo who's mapped basically half of Sarajevo. A guy north of Sydney who's now mapped a big chunk of that area. People in Lagos, Dhaka, Bangladesh. So it's been, those are the true heroes, right? Because they're the ones out there really building the map and enabling a lot of the enterprises that we work with to get this incredibly fresh map data, at a fraction of the cost that they otherwise would be paying for it.
There's so many questions that I have stemming off of that. The first of which is, so when you talk about this ground network of a community that's building the maps, obviously having a contributor network that builds these maps, do you think that it's been difficult to find people who are willing to go out and map certain areas? I know the OpenStreetMap had similar difficulties in terms of crowdsourcing and accruing that kind of mapping data. So I just wondered if you'd had any issues there as you've gone through this process.
Yeah. So a couple things. One is we decided to use video for a lot of reasons, but one of the reasons we decided to use video was what we really wanted to do was make it a lot easier for more people to participate in growing and scaling the map. And so, I have a ton of respect for OpenStreetMap. They've done a fantastic job, but the reality of OpenStreetMap is that it is I love maps, obviously, but in order to really become a contributor there, it's quite involved, right? There's a lot of nuance that a user, it's a complex interface, right? To like go and edit manually. And so that's a steep learning curve for most people. And so in terms of this contributor network, it's a lot easier. Everybody knows what a dash cam is, right? You install it once and it's producing video, and that's all you have to worry about. The same thing with drones, right? There's now a large and growing drone community of people who fly these drones, and oftentimes, frankly, they have nothing else to do with them. So,
Fair.
we turn around and we're like, hey, actually do something useful with it. And by the way, you'll make a little bit of money as well. So that's the other piece. We believe that the people who are contributing the data should be compensated. We believe that a lot of these communities in the past, they didn't financially reward the contributors, and the value of these products accrued to a relatively small number of people. But if you look at the data, that's the fuel, that makes these things go. And so we believe that they should be financially rewarded for their work, for their effort. And so we've created this tool called HiveMapper Studio, where we break down the world into these small hexagons. And you can go there, and it's kind of almost like an Uber driver saying like, okay, we want you to map here, so because these tiles over here are worth more than over here. And so it really helps people see, okay, I'm going to focus my efforts here. If I have a little bit of extra time, maybe I'll do this area. If I want to just do it for fun, I'll do it this area. So it gives them that focus of where should I spend my time, and then they can see how much they're being rewarded for. And what we do actually is kind of cool. We flip like once they've actually mapped a tile, their name or their username appears on it. So like there's a username by the name of MacGyver GIS, another one called Mr. Dundee. And so like you go to the areas and like the map is just full of their usernames, and it's fun. And so there's a lot of juice and fun in it as well.
Yeah, I saw on your website, you call it earning honey for your hive or for your map. I thought that was great. I thought that's very, very fitting. I love it as a name. So next I wanted to talk about something that's very exciting. So you have recently incorporated ground level data, and I'd love to hear about that and hear about that update. Yeah.
Sure. So we always listen when you're building a map on a global scale. It's not a either or, right? It's not a do you do airborne or do you do ground? You ultimately do both, right? There are definitely instances where you only need ground, or you can only get to the ground because you don't have an aircraft or you don't have a drone. And so that flexibility we felt was really important. We started from the air, but it was always our intention to go to the ground level. And so that's what we introduced, and what we're working towards. So there's kind of two ways you'll be able to do it. One is there will be a set of kind of commodity dash cams out there in the world that will say, if you're using one of these, we support it, right? In other words, like we understand the video really well, yada, yada, yada. In addition to that, what we also announced was this thing called an open dash cam. And the open dash cam is, commodity level, commodity dash cam, but it will be optimized for mapping, and it will do some specific things that are really crucial from a mapping perspective, specifically in terms of there's a lot of data, right, that it produces. And so being very, very efficient about, what streets we want to map, which ones we don't, because we've already seen them an hour ago or 30 minutes ago. So that kind of intelligence, bring that to the actual open dash cam. But the open dash cam, to be very, very clear, will be entirely open source, right? There will be nothing about it that's proprietary. We hope other folks will adopt it as well, and start to build, very similar types of devices. So, people in Africa, people in Southeast Asia, really building a device that is much more cost effective for their markets, but just aligning it to the specs of the open dash cam.
That's very exciting. And fascinating for me, especially as someone who I recently got my FAA 107, my drone pilot's license, and
Yeah.
I would be interested to see how that addition of a camera on the car would differ from the drone data that you get, because I wonder how that functions into some of the mapping that you do. If is there a priority between the drone data or the ground level capture data, or is there one that you prefer or that you can utilize better in creating these 3D visualizations?
Yeah, so the ground level is going to give you a very, very good angle in terms of things that are at street level. So signage, the entryway into a building, right? All of that kind of information, or trucking loading docks, how high are they? All that kind of really granular level information that is at street level. Clearly, what you will see though is if you have a 3-story building or a 4-story building and you're only mapping at ground level, the second and third or 4-story, just depending upon how tall that building is, you're not going to get that full building, right? So you'll get the facade of the building, maybe up to the, maybe up to the 2nd story, it depends. And that's where the drone comes in, right? That drone can really fill out the full building. And such that you have, that full situational awareness. So a great example of this is actually a transportation logistic company that operates in Southeast Asia. So, if you've ever been to Asia, or even certain cities in Africa, you have these like really large, complicated shopping centers and marketplaces, right? With a lot of windy, narrow streets. And so what they need is that full situational awareness of like, what does that entire complex look like, right? And so a drone is magnificent for that, right? But then in terms of getting down into those narrow streets, a car is definitely better for those. So that's what a good example of kind of where they play off each other really, really nicely. And then there are certain places in the world where you just can't get a drone up in the air, right?
Sure.
And so, clearly those places exist. I think what we've seen over the last couple of years is there's fewer and fewer places like that, right? And there's ways to kind of, you're an FAA, certified pilot, there's ways to kind of navigate around that, right? In a legal way. And so that's just a trend that will continue for the foreseeable future.
Fascinating. As before this interview, I was listening to your interview at the Gov Summit, the 2019 Gov Summit, and one of the things that struck me that was interesting, you mentioned that there's a big difference. There's a large difference between data that can be captured using a DJI drone or something that's more commercial, or as opposed to a drone that's viable for federal use, for Army contractors and whatnot. Sure. And so I wondered if, how you kind of came to that resolution for yourself in terms of, or as a company, that there needed to be multiple types of drone data that were viable for this platform.
Yeah. Well, I think most people look at the commercial drone market, which is, you have DJI as a great example, but I think even the best DJI, maybe you get 30 minutes, maybe 45 minutes, right? In terms of flight time, which is great. And I think that over the next couple of years, it'll probably be an hour and a half, right? But clearly the cost of collection goes way, way down the longer you can keep that aircraft up in the air. And so there are aircraft today, drones or unmanned systems that you can keep up in the air for 2, 3, 4, 6 hours. Most of them are in the defense world, but some of that technology now is seeping into the commercial world. Zipline, I think their aircraft that mostly flies today, I understand in Africa, I think it's like about an hour and a half, if I recall correctly. So that's a fixed wing aircraft. So anyways, the point is, from a mapping collection perspective, we felt like the cost of collection was directly correlated to how long you can keep that aircraft up in the air. And so, while DJIs are great because they're cheap and they're everywhere, you also want it to be able to do those other types of aircraft.
Well, I appreciate it. And I thought I'd end our interview with, this has been fascinating. I've read so much about HiveMapper, so I'm very, very excited that I got to talk to you. I wonder, so the question that I typically ask my interviews is to describe a time when you were lost, whether that's in your career or in your geographically, and how you found your way back again.
I think most of the time, okay, so between, I'll talk about a professional situation. So if you look at my professional career, I worked in, mapping, local information, search at Yahoo, and really fell in love with the business side of building out a map, right? I've always been very passionate about maps, but really started to appreciate the business aspects of, ooh, geez, this stuff is really, really expensive. Started a company called GigWalk, which was, or sorry, I should say is still up and running. And we had a data collection, basically an army of iPhone and Android users. Anyways, left that. And I briefly started a company in a totally different space, right? It was basically communication software, whatever. And it was actually like really interesting because there was product market fit, right? Like people really liked the product that we were building. And then I woke up one day and I was like, I cannot imagine that I'm going to be building this thing for the next 4 or 5, 6 years. Like I'm not passionate about this problem. I'm not passionate about this technology. I'm not passionate about the product. And so it was like a, kind of a holy shit moment where it's like, I kind of found something interesting. And there's actually like been a lot of companies in this space that have kind of gone off and done, really interesting things over the last 6 or 7 years, but it wasn't for me. Like it did not fit. And so I was definitely lost for like, I don't know, professionally, like a good like 9 or 12 months there. And then ultimately it was like, you know what, that's not for me. And then I started HiveMapper. And, I came back to the thing that is deeply passion, or is a deep passion of mine, right? Like if I have a free Friday evening, and like we've had a lot of them now because we're in shelter in place and you're not going out and you're not like hanging out with friends, I will just dive into the HiveMapper map and I'll explore like, what are the people doing? Like, where are they mapping? What are they checking out? What are the issues and challenges we're having? And so for me, that's not work. That's just really interesting and exciting to see all these amazing people all over the world who are mapping, their cities and taking great pride in it oftentimes. So to me, it always comes back to do the thing that you would do even if you weren't getting paid for. And I think when you start to veer off of that path, you very quickly get lost.
Fair. Well, that sounds like a very fun Friday night to me. I can't imagine. That must be very interesting to see who contributes and where is getting the most coverage. It sounds fascinating.
Yeah, it's fun.
Well, I appreciate you having you on the program, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.